Chris Metzen and the War Within. Let's see.
Pretty big things to talk about with the future of the game, even Illidan, and that's not in some unhinged lore theory way. No, we've actually got a lot to talk about across a dozen or so interviews, so let's get stuck in first with Chris Metzen, because I think his words hit a lot harder now that the campaign is finished. Most of us were too busy playing to focus on this, but Scott Johnson of The Instant sat down with Chris Metzen for a Wowcast special, and this was extremely full of things that you'll want to know about, doubly so now that we know how the campaign has ended. Take a listen to this clip.
I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, the sword, the resolution of the sword that we started with at BlizzCon.
The sword that we were supposed to pretend doesn't exist any longer. By the way, what happened with Azerite? You know, that whole deal of fighting over this magical, super powerful weapon called Azerite, you know? What happened to that? Is that just not fun anymore?
Actually, that's a 13 thing. We're going to build to that. I would even say you are not prepared for that moment.
Oh, yeah, that's a Illidan reference right there. So what, we're gonna squeeze the last bit of juice out of Illidan? His story, for all intensive purposes, even if you like it or not, has concluded. He's doing the thing that he kind of wanted to do. When we're bringing him back?
And leave it at that.
Yeah, Illidan's coming back in The Last Titan. Chris may as well have just said that outright. So, will Illidan somehow be massive and fight a big Aman'Thul with Sargeras' sword? We obviously don't know. It would be a neat way to end the saga, but I can't really see how a player would fit into that. Still though, Illidan currently serves as Sargeras' jailer, and if Eridikron's plan, which is to threaten Azeroth so much that the Titans are forced to show up so that he can basically go and kill them for revenge, if that happens, and of course the Titans are forced to the planet's aid, well, what happens to Illidan and the person that he's jailing? Maybe we'll
Probably nothing, because you need to be pretty stupid to let this dude out of his jail cell.
End up with some sort of big throwdown with our big cosmic emo boys. Hard to say, and I'll certainly get a lore walking episode put on the schedule for that. And if you don't know, by the way, over at bellular.games, which is our home on the internet, the lore walking podcast is just one of the many great things that our members get. That's, of course, alongside our videos, which are early and advert-free, like this deep dive into the Belladar, as well as in-depth investigations into lore and some killer guides, like our key binding guide and tool that people are loving so far. So that's the way to support the show. And now that you're hooked with Metzen, let's take it from the top and talk about what he said. So we learned that he actually showed up after The War Within was in development for around 10 months. He essentially liked what he saw, but he felt that for the 20th anniversary, they should really go all out and do.
Oh no, that's kind of a huge red flag saying, oh yeah, after Dragonflight, what I saw lore-wise was good, trust me, bros. That's a red flag. That's a really bad thing to say.
Do something big. That led to the vision of bringing back characters and
I'm pretty sure, dude, okay, listen. World of Warcraft has had a lot of lore expansions that were kind of nothing and shit, right? Warlords of Draenor was literally just a bunch of nothingness. But I don't think there has been a bigger nothing happens, who cares outcome than Dragonflight.
Story themes and trying to wrap it all up, but they all agreed that that was way too insane to fit into a single expansion, but they liked the idea. Then he had the vision of doing it over multiple expansions and building something that's just massive, and he says that somehow he sold that.
I'm sorry, did you really just say that Chris Metzen is such a visionary he figured out that you can pace your story over multiple expansions? Like, you know, TV shows do, more commonly these magical things called books do very often, that they have parts and whatnot, you know? Okay.
That to the teams. Of course, that's all for nothing if they can't actually make the damn thing, and that's why I'm glad he talked a little bit about development process. Essentially, he said when he came back, he was shocked at how the whole creative process was way more democratized instead of being super top-down from the leaders, which is how it used to be in the past.
That sounds bad. That sounds really bad. That sounds that you're gonna give a voice to the people who should not have a voice in Blizzard. You know what I'm talking about.
He basically agreed with the way they're doing things now, and he's taken an approach that he says is trying to marry their work, fitting his vision, and sort of being his kind of cool, but then...
Wait, this is stupid. So, Chris Metzen comes to Blizzard, he sees that now it's communistic commune instead of one person at the top who kind of decides what's happening, and now he says, oh yeah, I found communism really cool, but now everyone's gonna still go my way. Okay.
Then also being their art and them being excited about it. Now, we also talked about simultaneous work. This is quite something. So they're working on all 3 expansions simultaneously. They are mapping out 13's patches, and they're even thinking about 17, up to 17. By the way, when I say 17, I mean expansion 17, which is multiple after the end of World Soul Saga. The point, of course, is this lets them have a more cohesive vision and actually work with a bit of an end goal in mind. And man, I can't
That's not necessarily bad, I guess.
I don't overstate how important that sort of thing is. Now, it is a little bit apples to oranges because this is an example from film, but take The Lord of the Rings. That was always planned to be a trilogy. Its principal photography was like a massive, big, sort of simultaneous bulk across all 3 of the movies. So they kind of did it all with that plan in mind. You can then contrast that with The Hobbit. The Hobbit was initially supposed to be 2 films, then it gets turned into 3, and the whole thing ends up being a shit show, basically because they didn't really have a great plan, and that meant that they struggled to pull the whole thing together. I suppose I can see some of those former benefits actually being possible here. Now, Chris basically got so excited.
Okay, this is a very one-dimensional take on something that's not actually one-dimensional at all. So, there are benefits to a strategy like that, but there are also severe downsides to a strategy like that. And the downsides are, well, I'm just going to spill some of the bigger downsides right here, right now, okay? And that is that, okay, you plan, you're going to do this at the start, this there, and the final act is going to be the conclusion, right? Well, you're starting to do this. You're kind of making a rough estimate what's happening at the start, middle, at the end. And you're building all of that kind of together. But this is World of Warcraft, not a book or a movie. What happens when the players absolutely hate something that you do in the first War Within part? And that part is supposed to tie into the second and third act, and now you need to change it because everyone absolutely hates your guts for doing it in the War Within. Now you need to restructure the thing that's currently happening, the middle thing, and the end thing. And chances are, if your story is not complete shit, that thing that you now need to change is not going to be a singular entity. It's going to affect everything to its sides also. And, well, considering Dragonflight's not Dragonflights, but the War Within main's protagonist is a strong need-no man, diverse, half-elf cripple woman that's gonna teach Anduin how to be a proper man, and is most likely gonna be his love interest. I don't think that's gonna work.
That he called this one of the most nuclear creative phases I've seen for Warcraft. And I think that means quite a lot from a guy who creatively led Warcraft for almost all of its existence.
Bro literally just made Jaina hot, Sylvanas hot, and Thrall was his self-insert, okay? I'm sorry, but, you know, it wasn't bad, but listen. He dealt good with the simple things in life, but now World of Warcraft is not so simple anymore, which is actually kind of bad, because simple doesn't mean bad, at least in storytelling, not always. And now we're just a whole lot of useless complexity.
The thing, though, is, for the longest time, he was doing that while working on StarCraft, Diablo, and Titan, and probably other things we haven't even heard about. So, with him doing so much, and old Blizzard being so centralized into key leaders, I mean, it's no wonder that he basically burnt out and, quit Blizzard for a while. Since then, of course, Blizzard kept on growing, but the problem is it was still super...
Nah, Thrall just reached his conclusion of his Jesus arc, and Chris was, I am done.
Centralized. And that's a big problem, because clear leadership and a clear sense of mission for the whole organization, that paired with decentralized command on the level of implementation, tends to work best in a large organization if you actually want to get a degree of, speed and actually getting the job done. That just works provided there's accountability and feedback in the process. So it seems they've basically done a better job of that. Then, and of course, as an artist himself, he talked about kind of the trade, and he basically goes off on how he tells the team to just pour themselves into their art, even if they are a bit afraid, because sure, they could be judged, but that's the role of artists. That is something that Chris, generally speaking, has done himself in his work.
I hate World of Warcraft artists. Everything is just too detailed. Everything is just too oversaturated. It's a shit show.
I think the more you know about like him as a person outside of just what he's doing at Blizzard, the more you understand that. And it's one of those things where, yes, it does lead to some things being a bit cheesy. It leads to a few of the weaknesses, but it also enables the key strengths. And with an IP like Warcraft, you can basically tell that it didn't get where it is because it's never had any weaknesses. It got where it is because when its strengths were able to shine, they really did shine. I think that's a strong creative lesson. Basically, he said, everyone working in the game, no matter...
No, it just had a super good start. It was the biggest game at one point, and that's pretty much it.
...the role should be putting themselves in. It's risky, but it makes for, quote, genuinely affecting content. And he is right. But of course, we also all know the risks. Take a lot of the Dragonflight sort of cozy therapy time vibes. That's an example of that risk causing a bit of damage. Same goes, of course...
I love that animation because, okay, listen, dragon riding. Dragons, these higher-than-life beings that could not care about the struggles of man and whatever, now are literally just giant pets that want you to ride them because reasons. Saddle them like just plain horses, my dude. Great.
...of damage. Same goes of...
When do I get an Alexstrasza mount that I can mount and mount?
Of course, for Shadowlands' big, like, cosmic puzzle box focus. Those are just 2 times where the creator...
Let me give you the summary of Shadowlands. So, the god of death is dead, but there's a god of death, but that god of death is dead, and now we need to defeat the god of death, who on defeat tells you that there is a god of death. And at the end, he doesn't really tell you anything because he's like, ah, you fools, I was actually good all along, but reasons. That's effectively the whole lore of the Shadowlands. Deal with it.
Creativity wasn't really calibrated. It wasn't balanced, even though some elements could be...
Oh, also, everything's just a machine.
...good and could work. And that's where Chris talks about his own role. He basically said he's there to help manage that. In his own words, finding a way to bend everything towards a singular purpose, but boosting their sense of ownership. So far, at least, I think that's working pretty...
Oh, yeah. And in the Shadowlands, there's these 4 factions. You got your angels, you got your vampires. Don't ask questions, okay? Just roll with it. Then you got your Furies, and then you have your necromancers. And the deal about the necromancer realm is everyone who dies in the necromancer realm can choose how they look when they come back. And they all choose the aesthetic of, effectively, of an undead Felguard. Why? Don't know. I also don't want the answer to that.
Damn well in this expansion. As for the last few bits then, other than Illidan, well, Xal'atath. So Xal'atath is a longer form villain instead of a one-and-done one. So she will weave in and out of the saga rather than just being a single raid boss that we kill. And that...
I like this idea, but there's a risk that I think that is very likely to happen with Xal'atath, that she's going to be the MacGuffin villain. And that means that she's just going to appear at points, and she's going to be the reason why bad things are happening. And then you're supposed to deal with the cause, with the outcome of her doing bad things, but you don't get to deal with her, and then you're just gonna constantly be chasing her over and over and over again. Xal'atath does something shitty, and you need to clean her piss. Not drink her piss, which a lot of you like to do, but clean it up after her, okay? You're gonna have to do that. And I hope that that doesn't get lame and stale really fast, because that's kind of the trap I think that this could fall in. Xal'atath does X-Sting. She vanishes, you clean up X-Sting, and onward you go 10 times in a row doing the same crap. Well, having small sprinkles of Xal'atath saying, oh, I'm doing evil things. What will these evil things come out of? Woo, next evil thing. It's all a grand plan. And then at the end of the story, you're going to be like, So, all of the evil things she did was for X reason, but half of the evil things that she did don't actually benefit X reason. So there you go. It's gonna be like Sylvanas. Oh, I'm actually in cahoots with the jailer because he has a big schlong, and then Sylvanas does nothing and to further the jailer's plans. It's just a mess.
That means that if you think about the campaign right now, we've probably seen the last of her for a while. I mean, I don't know if she'll be back again in this expansion. Maybe we'll even have to wait until midnight. That said, she did seem really mad when she teleported away. So I guess, when do you think she'll be back? Who do you think's going to take a swing at us in our next patch? Anyway, then Metzen said that 11.0 is not built to be the full meal. It's basically meant to be part 1 of the saga. You definitely feel that when you're playing it. It's not a full meal. I'd say it definitely is a filling appetizer. In some games, that wouldn't really be ideal. Thing is, though, World of Warcraft is a live game. It's an MMORPG, and that means that if it's playing to the strengths of its format, it should feel, rather than a singular feast, it should feel like a very long tasting menu.
She should just kill Catgod. I'm so done with Catgod. He's also a MacGuffin. He just appears and then disappears and then reappears.
Where you go in lots of fun different directions and it's all very tasty and balanced. That's what we would hope for anyway.
Good. Die, Catgod.
I can certainly say at least what I want is just enjoying WoW to be simple and consistent. So far, at least, it seems like we're back.
Oh, look at that. It's Illyria Windrunner, because they ruined Sylvanas and they just want to keep the name Windrunner around so they can ruin the next character. Nice.
But obviously, only time will tell. Okay, with that big interview covered, there is still so much to talk about. There are a ton of other interviews. What I'm going to do here is just bring you the key details. So first,
this guy is balding.
Idin spoke to Taliesin and Avatel about a whole lot of things, but most importantly, the process of making the game. And again, Ian was basically mirroring Chris Metzen's description of things, that they used to be real prescriptive about what the team made, that it was very top-down, and they basically stopped that.
So, it worked, it was good kind of for a while, but then they stopped that because it got bad. Okay. I kind of feel that we're not actually dealing with the actual problem, but symptoms, but that's fine.
Stopped that for Dragonflight, and that led to way more freedom, where essentially the setting was decided up top and the rest was mostly left to the team. Though, of course, that did go a little bit funky. I mean, just pacing and that sort of thing. Now, though, he says that they found a bit of a middle ground that's got the positives of the freedom, but there's still like a cohesive, strong creative vision to guide everything together. Also, Ian said that he himself is actually not that involved in the core game development work now, because his job is more about leading the leaders of each part of the game instead. Again, remembering that they're making all 3 expansions simultaneously, and I mean, right now they're probably making patches for at least 2 of those expansions, or at least scoping them out. So, a hell of a...
By the way, in the War Within, the crippled half-elf black protagonist that looks like a man... that doesn't have an arm and an eye, I guess, refused to get a prosthetic because representation, I guess. Yeah, because, you know, there's so many people with missing arms in the world that would just, no, I want to not have an arm. They offered her a functional arm and she said, no, because I'm a woman that's strong and independent. Kill me. Oh, man. I'm looking forward to our first wheelchair-bound hero in Azerite.
A lot of work, and this is to the degree where he and the team felt comfortable with him going to Gamescom over the early access period rather...
Also, yet again, I'm going to remind everyone of the classic meme about World of Warcraft that I made, and that's the fact that whenever someone just puts a shovel into the ground, at this point on Azerite, you're probably uncovering an ancient kingdom. Farmer goes, digs a hole, uncovers an ancient kingdom of lost, insert random race here, and then a shitty reason why they decided to live underground. There you go.
Rather than him having to be deep in the pit, fighting fires with them over the launch. And harkening back to what I said earlier, I've got to imagine this is what's keeping WoW on its relentless schedule. There are fewer points of failure, there's more decentralized command, teams of leaders, right? And I think that is very different to the past. I mean, there are things that I have heard on the grapevine about Blizzard in the past that absolutely do corroborate the idea that it was extremely top-down, including even in like how they would handle feedback.
Too much top-down is bad, because then decision-making is very slow. That's the typical problem. But too much spread around and too much autonomy. One pod decides to do something that the other pods don't want them to do, and everything falls apart the same way. You need a balance. You need people who are actually leading the teams, but you need to be able that the teams actually can do stuff on their own at the same time, and they don't need to wait for Bobby Kotick to secretly send them yes or no from his multi-million-dollar slave yacht.
Back and that sort of thing. That is obviously different now. You can tell from playing the game. Next then, Holly spoke to PC Gamer and basically talked about how they've changed feedback over the last few years. Basically, instead of just looking at the forums, they now take all social media into account. They try to like directly verify things with analytics, and that's a part of why Dragonflight improved so much. Again, I would definitely have points of order to make on the narrative side of Dragonflight, but as an actual video game, I mean, Dragonflight was World of Warcraft getting into its best shape in years. She also said they're focusing way harder and just being faster in how they respond to feedback, which again, I think is something that you see. To quickfire the rest, warband alts as followers in dungeons is something they're looking into because
I really wondered how big the war within actually is going to be. For example, Dragonflight was good, but if Classic didn't come out at that time, whew, man, it would collapse, because without the numbers of Classic, the Dragonflight would have had the lowest numbers of any expansion. And this is, again, because of one very simple reason. You can't fail 5 times in a row and make shit after shit, and then expect people to still buy it. So I wonder how good the war within will be. Because Dragonflight was good, but the numbers were still not that great.
They'd just like to try it out. Remix content is going to come back at some point. The story mode raid will be invested in if they see the player interest. Older dungeons may show up in Mythic Plus, but those are the ones that need the most work. As an example, Grimbatul is totally different. They talked about cross-faction queued content, and that is something that's planned, but only for full groups, because they want cross-faction gameplay to be an opt-in thing for all players who engage in it. Then they hope to announce something on character screen customization soon. They've got nothing to share on the Brawlers Guild, but historically we know that if they bring it back, they said they want to bring it back in an evergreen fashion. Then raid checkpoints might be coming, but no announcements yet.
Oh boy. How about they remove trash mobs from raids? How about that? That sounds pretty good. Dude, seriously. Blizzard. Is there even a single person in this whole goddamn universe who's saying, oh yeah, I love trash in raids. I love doing it. I love dying and then having to run back 5 minutes back to the boss. I love it. No. There is none. Anyway, that was Billiard, and that was The Woke Within. Bye!